Evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Katie from Greenlight, and we're thrilled to host tonight's event with Gabriel Bump, who's presenting the paperback edition of his debut, Everywhere You Don't Belong. He'll be talking with Mateo Askaripour, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Gabriel, Mateo, and the team at Algonquin Books for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping things to go over. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and you can see a count of fellow attendees on the top of your Zoom screen, but the exact location will depend on what kind of device you're using. There are a few different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and to interact with fellow attendees. But if you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program, so please make sure you're putting them there and not in the chat. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our social media channels later on. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Everywhere You Don't Belong, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person in our bookstore locations, 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Every day of the week, and you can purchase Gabriel's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop the buy link in the chat in just a moment. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Our interviewer for tonight is Mateo Askaripour. He is the author of Black Buck, and his work aims to empower people of color to seize opportunities for advancement, no matter the obstacle. He was a 2018 Rhode Island Writers of Color Writers Colony Writer in Residence, and his writing has appeared in Entrepreneur, LitHub, Catapult, The Rumpus, Medium, and elsewhere. We're honored to have him as our neighbor here in Brooklyn. He will be speaking with our featured author, Gabriel Bump. Gabriel grew up in South Shore, Chicago. His nonfiction and fiction have appeared in Slam magazine, The Huffington Post, Springhouse Journal, and other publications. He was awarded the 2016 Deborah Schlossberg Memorial Award for Fiction. He received his MFA in fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he lives in Buffalo, New York. His debut book, Everywhere You Don't Belong, follows Claude McKay Love, who just wants to find a place where he can fit. But when he tries to escape Chicago for another place, he discovers there is no safe haven for a young Black man in this time and place called America. The book has received praise from acclaimed authors such as Tommy Orange and Mazaman Geste, who says, "This book is astonishing. You'll be smiling even as your heart is breaking, and you'll tip willingly into this world Bump offers you, because what appears again and again are spectacular beams of light, also called love, also called hope, also called family. Gabriel Bump has established himself as a stunning talent to be reckoned with." Gabriel is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then he'll be talking with Mateo and with all of you. Please take it away, Gabriel.
Thanks a lot for that intro, Katie. It's really awesome to be here virtually. I'm in the process of moving, so I'm like just surrounded by books in this like tiny room that will soon be a library. And Mateo, thanks a lot for doing this. I think like I don't know, it's been really awesome seeing your book take off. Right? I was kind of hoping for the best. Like a couple months ago, like even, a year ago when I knew this thing was coming out, and like, as is mostly the case with this thing, it's, you don't really know if the credit will come to those who deserve it, right? And so it's really nice to see you get everything you earn, right?
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we get in the conversation, I'm just going to read a little bit from the book. And just actually the last page of it, which I usually read, and don't worry, there's no like spoilers or anything. We don't. The big twist isn't revealed. It's not that kind of book. And just for some backstory, like Katie alluded to, this is a coming of age story about trying to find your place in the world. And the reason I like reading the last page is because I feel like it sums up what I got from this book, what I wanted people to like get from this book, and also, it's the last thing I wrote, right? And I think that like ending having this page come to me like felt, really nice and fitting. So without rambling too much more, here is Where We Belong. Sometimes when it's morning and we're both tired, I stare across the table and see Janice again in Juno's back seat. I see her hair rattling in the wind. I feel my hand on her knee, held there for hours and miles. I see her on the beach, picking up empty shells. I hear her kicking sand. I smell salt on her shoulders. I turn to her whenever the future frightens me. The present frightens me. The past ambushes my peace and sleep doesn't come. When the sun rises and Janice looks right at me, I see them all in her eyes. Grandma and Paul, happy, laughing, waving, safe. Everyone in South Shore safe and happy. They're okay without us. They forgive us for leaving. We're okay too. Yes, right where we belong. So a final page, no need to buy or anything like that. Just...
Yeah, but if they haven't read the book, now it's out in paperback. So everybody better get that. Gabe, thank you for asking me to be here, man. Just so honored to be celebrating your paperback with you. For me, this is extra special because when I was reaching out to people, or my editor was for blurbs, Gabe was someone who agreed to write a blurb for my debut novel. And sometimes when you read blurbs on the back of books, you can tell if someone just like read it and they're like, yeah, I like this. Or they read it and they're like, I don't really know if I like this, but I sort of like the person. But Gabe, your blurb, I mentioned this to you via IG, your blurb was so meaningful to me because it was just very personal. So thank you for that, man. And I'm just happy to be here with you.
Yeah, of course. So honored you asked. Yeah, I'm really honored.
Definitely, man. Your paperback's coming out and you got to update your bio because you won the Ernest J. Gaines Award, man, which if people in the audience don't know who Ernest J. Gaines is, look him up. A Lesson Before Dying. When I saw that Gabe won that, I did a dance for him because it is such a prestigious award. And we know awards come and go, but congrats on getting that, man. To kick it off, I have many questions. So everyone in the audience, please put your own questions in the Q&A because I'm just going to be asking things that I want to know, really, as someone who enjoyed the book and someone who is a big fan of Gabe and what he stands for. So let me kick it off. And it's not super light, but when I first encountered you as the writer, it was via a LitHub essay that you wrote, which was titled something along the lines of book tour in the early days of coronavirus. And I read that, and even though experiences aren't one-to-one the same, I felt as though I was connecting with a kindred spirit. And that's when I posted it on Twitter and I tagged you and I was like, yo, you snapped. And then we had a little back and forth. So I want to ask, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome internally and externally in order to write this book?
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks.
I know we're starting off hot, man, but it's been on my mind. I had this on my mind for like a minute.
Yeah, well, and first, thanks for the kind words about the essay. And I guess I feel like, as always, the headline is kind of misleading, right? Like the essay is kind of not, for no one's fault, right? But the essay is more about like how this experience of like going on a book tour, like publishing a book, kind of forces a person, like a writer, to relive their life in this kind of intense way, right? Because strategically you do book events when you're on tour in places that, like, you've been, right? That, like, you have some connection to, right? And not all connections we have to places are 100% good. Like, no connection we have to a place is like 100%, pure and nice.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in terms of obstacles I had to overcome to write this book, I don't necessarily think that I had to overcome something that, like, or things that your normal writer doesn't have to overcome in order to like create something, right? Like, I think that when I was young, and this is probably a good place to start, but like when I just went to college in Missouri, at the University of Missouri, I wanted to be a journalist, right? Like, I really wanted to write like features, like long flowery features about like athletes, right? Like, that was kind of my dream, is to be like to write cover stories for Sports Illustrated. But pretty soon after I got to Missouri, and this sense of, I don't know, like homesickness combined with like alienation, right? Like being this kid that grew up on the south side of Chicago, like in all Black neighborhood, suddenly being thrown in the middle of Missouri, where, if you go to, I could go to like my friends' dorm rooms, and they would have like Confederate flags on the walls, right? And like Confederate flag, like shot glasses. And it's just this complicated experience, not to actually pass total judgment on those people being like evil people, right? But I think that like I experienced like whiteness and otherness in a way that I didn't really experience like growing up in Chicago, right? Like growing up with like diverse groups of friends, right? Like growing up going like to diverse schools. And so for me, like that moment totally changed the trajectory of my life. I think, like, being in this foreign land, feeling like a foreigner, like in America, right? And so I ended up like dropping out and moving back to Chicago, and like I worked as a waiter, like worked in a nightclub, like for a couple months, and then decided almost on a whim to go to the School of the Art Institute and major in creative writing, right? Like, because I took some classes in Missouri, had some professors that, like, you could probably like do this if you wanted to, right? It's like, I don't know what you want to do, but you could do this. And so I wanted to write, and I went to the Art Institute and met some really kind professors like Adam Levin, Janet Desagne, or some that come to mind. And I just fell in love with writing fiction, right? And I decided to kind of go for it. And I was lucky enough to have parents that kind of allowed me to do that, right? Like, I'm sure there was some shock when first, like, I want to be a journalist in like a dying industry. And I was like, well, I don't want to be a journalist. I want to be a fiction writer. And they, still said, if you're good at it and think you can do it, then you should chase it. And I mean, it's a hard profession to try and feel settled in. I'm sure, like, right? I feel like it's a really isolating profession, one that forces you to like ruminate on yourself more than is probably healthy, right? To like get those emotions on the page, you have to like sift through what's going on inside you, right? Like what happened in your past. And like a lot of my like feeling like I was wandering at a young age, feeling out of place at a young age, led to me putting like Claude together, right? Like led to me putting this like group of characters together, creating this book, right? And like, so what I wrote about in that essay and what I feel is true now is like writing, isn't therapy, right? Like therapy is therapy. But I think like writing can gives people, gives us, right, you and me, like this avenue to explore really complicated emotions and like past experiences that we might otherwise repress, right? And so to be on tour, to like go back to Missouri to give a reading, right? Like this place I haven't been in like 7 years, right, to go to like Western Mass, where I went to grad school, and left in, you know, somewhat unpleasant terms, I guess, like as we tend to like, not every place we leave is for good, right? Like I left because I didn't want to be there anymore, right? Like I didn't feel right. So like going back to all these places and like doing this weird promotional thing, we're still like dealing with past trauma. It's a bizarre experience. I think, I don't know, maybe like writers and musicians like go through, right? Like this just weird like touring through your past lives. So yeah, I guess that's one way to answer that question.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And you know, again, I got a lot of different types of questions. I know we came out swinging. I'm tempted to pull it back a little bit, but I'm just going to keep going if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
You know, your book has been out for a year. Your debut novel, right? You put parts of yourself into it, as you're saying, with some of your own history in terms of leading you to create Claude, who feels like an other. On the South Side, and Claude, like you know, goes to Missouri, which is a completely different place than where he came from. What, I guess, and again, this is one of my own personal questions that I want to know. What has your life as a writer been like, and how does it differ from the idea that you had of being a writer? Because I know that, you know, before I published a book, I was like, oh yeah, this and that is how it's going to be. And this is how it's going to go. And I'm going to know these people. But of course, we're in a very different place now. So I'd be curious to learn a little bit more about how has the idea of being a writer different from the reality for you?
Yeah. I mean, I actually would like to hear, after I finish, I'd like to hear kind of your answer to this too, because you're in the throes of like this changing, right, and becoming real.
Yeah.
I think for me, like even when I was in grad school and was like putting this book together, and then like, you know, it was my thesis. It's what I spent most of my time there working on. I don't like, I figured like best case scenario, I'd sell this to some small press, like go on, like not even like the idea of touring was like weird, right? I was like, I just sell this to a small press. I'll like use this book to like get a teaching job somewhere. And then just all these like surprising things like kept happening, right? Like I ended up going like with an editor and a publisher that really got behind me and my work, and even so much so, like they wanted a second book from me, right? Like, which I wasn't expecting. And so I was like, okay, well that sounds cool. Like I'll write this second book. And then just like every step of the way has been surprising, I guess. Like even from like on publication day, like seeing like a review in the New York Times, right? Like from this author that I really loved. And like I wasn't expecting that. You know, like,
wow, Tommy Orange, man.
Yeah, like I mean, I wasn't expecting any of it, and so I think like when I say any of it, like actually any of it, like I wasn't expecting anyone to like read this book.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like holding on to my seat, like as you know, I didn't shoot off into outer space, but cool things were happening, right?
Sure.
Like getting, I guess like culminating with like the Ernest Gaines, but even before like the Gaines, like the Midwest Booksellers Award, like that was like something that's really special to me, right? Like that felt really amazing and unexpected. And so I guess like how the life feels different is that I didn't really think that I could like do this, right? Like I didn't think that like I could do this and it'd be real, and I could potentially do it for a long time, like if I'm lucky enough. And so now I'm still getting used to it and just trying to enjoy it, right? Like and trying not to like mess it up, I guess. Like keep like working, right? Like I want like my next book to be better than this book. I don't know what better means, but I want it to be like different, right? Like I want to like keep growing as an artist.
Yeah, man. I thank you for that honest answer. You know, for me, I had all of these thoughts and ideas, and by no means by no means any entitlements, but I was like, I hope people like this. I hope people this, that, and the other. But it's funny, and you might have experienced this before my book came out. I was like, oh snap, what if no one's messing with it?
Yeah.
Or what if a bunch of people read it and they hate it and they're trashing it, right? And I'm the type of person where I say it's cool if not everyone likes something. I think that actually means that you're creating something powerful and impactful because not everyone likes it. But then I was like, what if everyone hates it? And what if I let myself down, but also my family, my publisher, all of these folks. So I had some doubt that was creeping in before the book came out. And when my book came out, I think what surprised me and that I didn't anticipate is how many people would get it.
Yeah.
I think that there was going to be a lot more people that didn't get it. But when I read some of these Bookstagram reviews, and you might feel the same about the reviews that you see, it felt like some people really connected with what I was doing, which was a gift.
Yeah. And I mean, like that's but that's like the coolest stuff, right? Is like getting like a message from someone that you've never met and like probably will never meet in real life, like saying like, hey, I bought your book and I really loved it. Like that's kind of the coolest thing, right? And because like I don't know, like I would send those messages to, like authors, like when I was like in college, I'd be like, man, I read your book, I really loved it, like like it's really like inspired me to do something. So that's the stuff where I think we're really lucky. But I mean, in terms of like the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome, aspects of it, and still thinking that I'm like one false step away from like blowing up everything, right? Like I don't think that's ever gonna go away, right? Like I think that comes with it hasn't gone away for me yet, at least.
Well, what I see in you, and I have it in myself as well, is you're not forgetting who you were, agent or a book deal, right? Or the book was out in paperback. And for me, I aim to hold on to that for as long as possible, because I remember when I also was sending those emails to people, to other writers, just telling them that I love their work and hoping to get some sort of response. So it's like a necessary grounding. So it's cool to hear you speak that way. Talking about the book a little bit, in one of our first exchanges or earlier exchanges via IGDM, I was telling you how I enjoyed your book, and it really brought up a lot of thoughts about my own grandmother to me, because Claude's grandma loves him so much and believes in him so much more than he believes in himself. And it made me think about grandmothers in general, but more specifically my own grandmother, and how special it was for me to have her in my house, like living with us when I was growing up, and also just her belief in myself and my brother. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you put together Grandma.
Yeah. So I mean, like my grandma's interesting, right? Because this book started off as just a few short stories just with Claude and Grandma, right? Like growing up together. And obviously it's dedicated to my grandmother. Yeah. There's a lot of my grandmother in this book. But the interesting thing, I guess, about it is that like for most of my life, I didn't really have a close relationship with my grandmother. She lived in Harlem for much of her life. Like my mom is from Harlem, and most of my maternal side is out there still. And I didn't really get to know her just because we didn't like go there much when we were growing up. People were busy, like that kind of thing. I didn't really get to know her until she until she got really sick when she was older, and ended up moving back to Chicago and living with us. For most of that time, I was spending like in some form of like hospice and life care. And we got to be really close, right? Like I'd spend a lot of nights with her if my like parents were working or out of town. Like I'd stay at the house and like help her up the stairs and stuff like that. And after she passed away, and I went to the funeral in Harlem, as is often the case with like funerals with people that have lived full lives. You know, it's just like filled with all these people that had stories of her like power and greatness, right? And so when I went back home and you know, I had to write a story for a fiction workshop.
Yeah.
I said kind of a way to deal with this grief and this like wondering of, you know, what if I knew this person my entire life like really well? What if she raised me?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how this book like sprung out, right? It's like taking this like it's imagining this love that existed, but kind of like exploding it. Right? It's just Claude and Grandma. Like, what does that look like? Now, I'm not like, you know, I'm not Claude, right? Like, in a lot of ways, but I think in terms of the love that they feel for each other and that connection, like that's one of the aspects of the book that is really personal to me, right? For a lot of reasons.
Damn, man.
Yeah, grandmas are the best, man. Like
grandmas are the best, but it's just crazy hearing, like, being on the other side, hearing you talk this way, because this is, you know how many times I've had to tell people I'm not Darren, like nonstop. And it's crazy because as we're talking more, I was like, hold up. I was just talking to Gabe about how he moved from the South Side to Missouri. Okay, Claude does the same, right? It would be so easy, and you could almost not blame people for being like, you're Claude, right? And grandma is your grandma. That's why I was trying to be careful with asking, how did you come up with grandma? Not like, oh, this is your grandma, right? Yeah. Or assuming that there's a Paul in your life, or you know, any of these other Janice and these other people. I loved Juna and her pops. I thought that added a very important level and layer to the story in terms of putting a face to antagonists, like the people that were them in their shop. And it's not just the red belters. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, audience, you need to read the book so you know who I'm talking about. So sticking with the book though, right? And not going so much into the life of Gabe yet. One of the first things that jumps out to me was the language in the book. The sentences are short and they're almost bullet-like. Right. And then the dialogue just runs down. Now I'm going to mix a metaphor, but it just runs down the pages like a waterfall, just varying in terms of who's speaking. So again, this is a me question. Why did you decide to write it that way? And is this something that I'm trying not to ask two questions at once that goes against my one of my rules, but is that like a hallmark of your writing that you want to keep with it? Or was it just a function of this book?
Yeah, no, you can ask 3 questions at once if you want to. Well, I mean, that was the style I was writing in when I like first started writing this book, right? Like I think that like those sentences, like I was reading a lot of, because I started writing this book like 7-8 years ago, right? Like when I was still trying to figure out what kind of writer I want to be. Or who I was. Like I guess I still kind of am, but yeah. But I was reading like a ton of Raymond Carver. I was reading like a lot of like Stuart Dybek, like Dennis Johnson, and I just really liked how those writers that I emulated could make a simple sentence do a lot of work. Like simple in like in a word length way, right? Like not simple in an impact way. And that just felt easy to me, like when I was writing. And what I actually think like is still interesting about this book, and what I kind of like about it is that like, you know, we follow most of, well, I think it's interesting from a craft perspective, right? Yeah. Like in hindsight, looking back on it. Like we watch Claude grow up and like we watch his voice change, right? So like, so in the beginning when he's younger and just mainly observing things, right? There's not much interiority. Yeah. He's just like explaining all of the wacky stuff that the adults are doing. Yeah. And then as he like ages, as he gets into his like teenage years, he starts dealing with more complex emotions like within himself. That I like felt the voice kind of expanding a little bit, right? Like, and I feel like the voice in the last chapters is different than the voice in the first chapters, and that wasn't really intentional. Like I just changed as a writer, right? Like I like kind of like grew grew as a writer and had a better sense of like who this character was, right? Like, what was this character thinking like inside? Like, where is he, how would he say something in an interesting way, like in his voice, it's like different than how he'd say like when he was 5 years old, like to 18. And so feeling that organic growth is one of the reasons why I think novels like are really cool, right? Like why I like really like writing them, right? Is because you can grow with your characters in them, right? Like your voice can change them. And the dialogue thing, like I just love, like I think dialogue is such this underutilized thing in fiction, right? Like it's just like the prose, just like the normal sentences and description. Like the dialogue is words on a page that can achieve like humor, like poetry, that can like do all this stuff, right? And so, and also like an awesome way to like move plot along, to get like character development just sneaked into these really short exchanges. And I don't know if I still feel that way, right? Like I feel like if I was gonna write this book now, I think I would write like a different book, right? Like, and I don't know like what it would look. Yeah, I think it would like look a lot different on the page if I was just to write this story again, which I think is cool, right? Like, I think that's like a really cool aspect of it. But I guess not in terms like I think the dialogue is like worthless now, but like when I was writing this, I was obsessed with it. Like I was really, really obsessed with like getting the most out of dialogue, and I guess still am, but maybe to a lesser extent. I'm
So
more
are you saying
like commas now or something?
are you saying that if you wrote this today, that there would be less dialogue, or?
No, I just think like the telling would be different.
Got
right?
it.
And I wonder like if you wrote Black Buck today, don't you think it might be like a little bit different of a book?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, without a doubt, like there are things that I've learned about the book, and I sort of already had asked you like a variation of this question, so I'm not going to waste a question on it in terms of, things that you would change or what you've learned. But without a doubt, there were things that were revealed to me by myself from thinking about it more after the book came out, or were revealed to me with the help of other people just sharing their perspective, and me, not just being dismissive of other perspectives. So for sure, because while I believe I was intentional with a lot, there are certainly things that I couldn't see that I can see now. But that's why we can work on more. So something that you touched on, you were talking about how Claude, yeah, we know another Clyde. we don't like that Clyde from my book. But Claude, when Claude was younger, he was observing all the wacky things that the adults did, and they're doing some really wacky stuff, right? I think about his pops in his underwear saying "fuck Olajuwon," or even on that same page talking about the black fiddler on the roof. When I actually sat with that and I tried thinking about what that would look like, I was dying, like a black Tevier. So I'm going to ask you a question that's often asked to me, was it important for you to include humor? And if so, why? What was the point of it?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it was important to me because I think that like trying to convey as wide a range of emotions and like sensations in fiction is important, right? So there's like a lot of tragedy and drama, like nestled next to humor, which I think is how real life plays out sometimes, right? We're not always crying, we're not always laughing, right? There's usually a mixture of both. And I think that like a lot of the humor was unintentional. I guess like the black fiddler in the roof was like kind of funny to me, like the image of this dad. But going back to like the dad, when Michael Jordan comes back from retirement and like he jumps out of the car and runs into like Michigan, like screaming "fuck Olajuwon." It's a funny image, but it's also like heartbreaking. Like Claude's remembering that because that's the final fight his parents get in before his mom like leaves the family and lives with a dentist, right? So I feel like when I was writing that, I wasn't just thinking of it as funny. Like I was saying, okay, what's the like an interesting, complex situation to present? And I feel like that's with a lot of them. Like even when you talk about like Juna and her dad in Missouri, I feel like there's a lot of humor in those in their interactions with like Claude and Janice, but like they're also being terrorized, right, by these incels, right? These like frat boy incels, right? And so I feel like trying to strike that balance is really important to me, right?
Yeah. I think it's masterful as well when you can have a scenario like his pops in his underwear, because at first I was like, oh, this is sort of like, not cool. Like, is he unhinged? But then when he's screaming and I'm picturing it, I'm like, okay, maybe 3 seconds ago, I was like, oh, this is strange. But then I'm like laughing. So to be able to present a scene like that, and most definitely have readers look at it in different ways, depending on their own histories or wherever their headspace is at, is just masterful in my opinion. So, all right, bringing it back to you a little bit, we were talking about how Claude moves and you move too, and you were most recently in Buffalo, and now you're somewhere else now. And I'm not trying to put out your Google Maps location for everyone, but something I think about, and I don't live too far from where I grew up, and I'm still living in the same state. But and I'm also thinking about this in the wake of the protests in 2020 and how much I admired how much you were involved in them, right? And how keyed in you were and are in affecting change in those ways, even beyond the page, because not all of us are doing that. Do you feel a specific responsibility to where you grew up and the people there, and that you will forever be tied to it and will be doing work in terms of bettering people's situations there? Or do you feel like, you only have the capacity to do what you can wherever you are now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's interesting because like I don't know, like I'm a novelist, right? Like I'm a novelist and a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Like and I think that and like so okay, so this is something I thought about last summer, and then to I guess get more directly into the question, right? Like what is the artist's role in like a moment like that, like in an uprising? What I came to see the artist's role and like my role in it is that like I'm allowed the freedom to say things that many people can't, right? Like because like I don't like me speaking up against like racial inequality, police brutality, kind of mismanagement of society as a whole, isn't going to lose me the job that I need to feed my family.
Yeah.
And so, and then also like if in a moment like that, when people are feeling the pressure, it's really important that everybody applies that pressure to the extent that we can, to like try and stick as many feet and hands and like bodies in the door as possible so they can't ignore it and just move on, right? So like that's kind of how I kind of view the work that we do, right, in a larger cultural space. It's like for whatever reason we have this ability to like kind of articulate emotions and frustrations, and because we're allowed to, right, like because we have the space to do, we have like the ability to practice and like get kind of what we want to say together. Now in terms of like my relation to South Shore and into places I've been, I mean like what I have learned from living in like South Side Chicago, Columbia, Missouri, Amherst, Massachusetts, Buffalo, New York, and now like Durham, North Carolina, is that the struggle isn't limited to one place. Like kind of what people are experiencing on the east side of Buffalo is really similar to what people are experiencing on the south side of Chicago. It's really similar to what people are experiencing in Columbia, Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, Ferguson, Missouri, what people are experiencing in Springfield, Massachusetts, Boston, right? Like Providence, Rhode Island. And I think that seeing the interconnectedness of the struggle and how like big the system, how big the broken reach of the system is, right?
Pervasive.
Is really, it was like eye-opening to me in a way that's like not surprising, but just feels that, okay, like one way to change a system is with total collective action.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is for like the solidarity across like boundaries and state lines and stuff. So I think that if anything, my travels have made me more in tune with, I don't know how broken the system is as a whole, but yeah, like, you know, kind of South Side forever, South Side I die, but like I care about all those places. I care about everybody kind of being safe and feeling free.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that, man. And, you know, thank you for that answer. I thought about the same type of thing, especially, you know, in 2020, in the wake of those murders and executions, like what is our role? You know, is it to post? Is it to protest? Is it to just focus on the page? And I think that for different people, it means different things. But as long as people are acting, it's helping the overall collective fight. You know, as you're saying, that crosses boundaries, that crosses industries. And some people are going to be in the streets, right? And some people are going to be writing. You know, James Baldwin talks about during a series of murders of his friends, and he was documenting all of that. And I think that that's partly our responsibility as well, you know, to document and publish. Yeah.
Well, and then, I mean, like also, you know, support the experts doing the work, right?
Yep.
So it's like, you know, support your like local, there's work you can be doing all year round just as a citizen, right? Like removing yourself from a writer. It's like, okay, which political candidate needs my help, right? Like which food pantry like needs like my money right now.
Yep.
So it's like that, those are the kind of things that I think that every citizen like can do and should do, right? To like fight for equality. And like in terms of us as writers, I don't like, mostly we're useless, right? Right? Like, yeah, you can talk about some like greater good, like for, you know, just the arts and the importance of the arts like existing, right? But like, I'm not an expert in political organization, but like I will support those that are, right? Like,
yeah. you're like, don't let the government call me up to talk.
Yeah, like I don't have the answers. Like I have some like particular way that I think the world should work.
Yeah.
There's smarter people than me that like have been studying this stuff for their whole lives, right? That like can figure out better ways to put it into practice.
No, I feel you, man. I try to live into the same thing where I am not an expert on a host of things, but you are an expert on your life. Yeah. Right. And on your book and on your outlet. And that's what I tried to hold close to. But also, you know, challenging what you said. I know that there are a lot of young ones who probably see you and are like, oh, he's from South Shore and he looks like me, you know, he's Black and he writes. Maybe I could do that too. And that's an almost perfect segue. And before I ask this question, anyone who has questions in the audience, please submit them via the Q&A. We're about to get into them if you have them. But one of my final questions is talking about the responsibility that we have as writers, right? And narrowing it down or broadening it to Black writers, right? Do you feel as though in 2021 we have a specific responsibility in terms of what we write about and how we write or how we conduct ourselves? And again, this is me asking you because A, I want to know what you have to say, and B, it's something that I am constantly thinking about right now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can't really like offer a definitive answer to that, right? Like I think that first and foremost, if we imagine ourselves as Black authors, I think that we should, you know, try and create the best art that we can, whatever that means to us, right? Yeah. And I think that like I guess I was kind of alluding to this earlier, but I think that our responsibility should be the responsibility of all people, of all writers and like novelists, right? Like I really believe that our well, like just to stay with our country, not to even talk about the world, but I really think that like our country is fundamentally broken, right? Like there's a lot of things wrong with it. And I feel like it should be everyone's duty to try and like fix it and make it more like equitable, right? So I don't think that this falls on just Black authors to do it, right? I feel like for whatever reason, and maybe this is changing, like non-writers or just white writers, like I said, let's say writers of non-color, just white, white writers, I feel like get a pass when they shouldn't, right? In terms of just being present in the world, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like being like saying, oh, this problem, or like police brutality doesn't affect me because I've never been brutalized by police. But like that affects everybody, right? Like, I don't know, like I feel like it's not just a Black person being affected by it. Like it's a stain on the country as a whole. And it's like this original sin that everybody should be trying to rectify. Yeah,
no, I feel that, man. And I think that the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people say, like you said, I haven't been brutalized, so why should I even care? Yeah. Or why should I think about it? But then when you hear, if you're one of these, white people and your one Black friend, something happens to him or her or them, right? Then you're like, oh, was it just like an isolated experience, or is it actually something that, is occurring widespread? And then, they get involved. So, all right, Everywhere You Don't Belong, it's your debut, right? And you're talking about, you alluded to, and I'm going to try to not like go too deeply into this, but you alluded to a second book. Do you feel as though your next few works are going to be centered around the same types of topics, or are you trying to completely break form and do something completely different?
Yeah, I mean, the second one is, I think close to be like, I don't know, it's close to being done.
Wow, what?
Yeah, so right now doing some edits, like the second round of edits with my editor, and I think that we're like close to something. And I mean, it's a lot different, right? It sounds a lot different. It's a sadder book. But it deals with the same issue of people trying to like find themselves, right? And it's like a broader cast of characters. This idea of searching for belonging is pretty interesting to me. In the books that like I'm working on now deal with it in different ways, right? And I think that what attracts me to this idea of belonging and fitting in is it just seems very like American in a way, right? Like it seems like very tied to the American experience for people that like aren't the original colonizers or something. Yeah. Right? Because it's such like this big, broad, diverse place. Like you can so the thing I'm working on now is like it follows a guy that like drives from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and goes down to Buffalo to try and start a new life. And that's something you can do in America. You can like just drive like to this totally different like universe, right? Yeah. Try and like see, okay, who am I here, right? I couldn't find myself there. Like, who am I here? It's the same reason Claude goes to Missouri. It's like, I can change it, right? And I feel like just really embracing those possibilities for self-exploration is like pretty cool, right? And I don't know if that's what will always interest me. I might just like the idea of writing, I don't know, detective mystery sounds pretty cool too. But like I feel just like
Colson's doing it now. Colson's switching it up. He's writing a Harlem.
Is the new one? Is the new Colson a detective?
Yeah, it's gonna be like a Harlem-based mystery. And I saw him speak at the Museum of New York, as it's called. It's a weird name. And he was saying that he was reading a lot of Chester Himes. He was just studying a lot of the greats. Of course, he was probably reading Walter Mosley to figure out how to write his own So I'm excited for the day that you flip the script and you start doing some detective novels too. That'd be wild.
Romance. I don't know, like just doing some other stuff. Like hopefully we'll be doing this for a long time.
I hope so. Knock on wood, man. And I feel like you and I are aligned in that we're just gonna write what we want to write, rather than trying to fall into a trend or be like, oh well, this really resonated well with these people with this piece of work, whether it's a short story, an essay, or a novel. And that makes me excited for your next book and just for your career, because you never know what you're going to put out, which is cool. Again, one of those me questions, what inspires you to come to the page? And I'm not going to say come to the page every day, because I know how it is. Some of us aren't writing every day. Some of us aren't writing every month. But what I guess inspires you?
I don't know anymore, besides the fact that like if I don't do it, I feel weird, right? Like now it's just this like impulse, right? To like sit down and like I've been doing because I think just like you, right? Like this past year, it's been really hard for me to write anything. Like for anybody to do anything, right? Like we're just like one example of how society's been turned upside down and our attention span have been like all morphed and like, I don't know, like I can't focus on anything. So what I've been doing is like waking up and just like writing longhand in like these notebooks that I bought, like trying to just write a novel like that way. And I don't know.
Wow, the whole thing?
What?
The whole thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and do it. Like and just like type it up. Like I feel like there's less pressure. Like I'm doing weirder stuff. Like I'm having fun doing it. Right. Like it reminds me of when I was like in college in Missouri or in high school, and I would just like write stories and like poems in my notebooks in class. Right. Like that kind of feeling again, like that kind of freedom and no pressure, like feels really cool. Like it feels really nice. But like, what about you? I guess so. You're in total promotional, like crazy mode. I assume you haven't been writing much, which is cool. But like, what brings you?
No, I haven't, man, and I'm excited to get back to it when I can. What is keeping me inspired in this moment? And you and I were talking about it, offline before we started, is just being able to interact with readers who read the work and enjoy it and see themselves seen in it. That's giving me life and it's inspiring me every day. So sometimes if I'm tired, I'm like, cool, let me take care of myself. But if I can respond to a message real quick, then I will, because I feel as though that this is just in line with my purpose right now. And then when it'll be time to pull away a little bit and focus more on the work, we'll do that too. So I guess you were talking about pressure, and you are in a place that I'm not. My book just came out. Your book has been out for a year, and your paperback is out now. And you're talking about how you're close to a second book, which I was like, what? That's just so exciting. Do you feel that the stakes are higher because your first book, did well, it won awards, and people liked it?
Is the stakes high? No, man. Actually, like the stakes feel a little bit lower, right?
Really?
Like because it's, I don't know, like it. For me at least, like I was just so, I don't know, so preoccupied with how the work would be received, right? And like I went through, like after it came out, like during the process, like I'm sure you've kind of experienced this too. Like I went through like peaks and valleys, right? Like there were days where I felt like really good about it, and there were days where I'm like, like why am I even like doing this, right? Like what's kind of the point of this? And like all the good stuff that came out was just like nice and surprising, and yeah, it's like some affirmation, right? But like, I think that the games is like a good example of this. Like, do I think that I was the only person like deserving of that? I feel like I had to have won that, right?
Yeah.
Do I feel like there were awards that other people won that like I had like a shot at, right? Like, and so that kind of stuff is like, I don't know, it just going through it, like making it through the entire year, like coming to the paperback release, I'm just trying to enjoy it, right? I just want to like write the books that I want to write, like, and have fun. Like, I actually feel less pressure, like less anxious about all of it. And that's still kind of day to day, but I don't know. We're just so fucking lucky. Like, we're just like so insanely lucky to be able to be like doing this, and that's the thing that I, want to enjoy too. It's just like, geez, man, I get to do this. I get to, see where it takes me.
Listen, man, I'm gonna have this conversation and your face like imprinted in my mind next year when my paperback is coming out. Yeah. I hope that like I'm looking at you as like this Zen veteran, and I know that this is your debut. I know, man. But just the state of calm that you have right now, and peace. And I know it's not always like this, you know. I know. But for me, it is really affirming, and it just makes me feel good to be writing at the same time as you, man. Someone just who is so dedicated to their craft, but also just being open. Just being open and grateful. I talk about it all the time. And I wonder, as I'm talking about it now, I wonder if people think it's just a buzzword, but I am continually grateful. Yeah. As you said, we're so lucky to be pursuing our craft and to have it in a physical form that people could read, because I'm sure that years ago, just like me, you're like, yo, I would dream of this being possible. And here you are, your paperback's out, man. So kudos to you. I'm gonna bring Katie back in here. Katie, if you wanna close us out with some words from Greenlight. But Gabe, my brother, congratulations, man. Thank you for being you, and I so look forward to what you come out with next.
Yeah, and thanks. Thanks for doing this, Mateo and I. I don't know, man. Like, I love watching your star go up and up and up. Like, it's really awesome to see. And so I think that I can't wait. I can't wait to hang out in person someday when all this
Me too, man. Once this is through, I'll go down to North Kakalaki, or maybe you'll come back up, and we'll get to it, man. We got a lot to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you both for that great discussion. And thanks to everybody for joining us. If you missed any of tonight's event, or if you just want to watch it again, we will be posting the recording to our YouTube channel. So please look for it there later on. And don't forget to buy your copy of Everywhere You Don't Belong in store or online at greenlightbookstore.com. You can find the link in the chat. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Tara. Everybody be good. Talk to you soon.
Bye.